Good evening, Philippa MacDonald with ABC National Late Edition News. Prime Minister Paul Keating is preparing to unveil his new look ministry. He hopes to announce his cabinet lineup tomorrow. Australia's to have its fourth treasurer in 6 months. John Dawkins will take over from Ralph Willis. With the details, political editor Russell Barton.
Paul Keating's been busy this Boxing Day, working on the shape of his new ministry. And he's still at it, trying to have the reshuffle completed by this evening for release tomorrow. The big change is in Treasury. As expected, he's opted to promote John Dawkins, his long-time supporter, to the key post, even though that means Australia has its fourth treasurer in barely 6 months. Out goes Ralph Willis, treasurer for less than 3 weeks, to return to the finance portfolio. Kim Beazley, the solid Hawke supporter, is expected to move into John Dawkins' old post as Minister for Employment, Education and Training. Another key change involves another Keating backer. Graham Richardson should get the Transport and Communications portfolio, where so much of the microeconomic reform agenda is based. Neil Blewett is set to take Senator Richardson's place in the important social security area, which is going to provide the source of much of the attack on John Hewson's goods and services tax package. Hapless John Kerrin, who will have been moved 3 times in 6 months, now is expected to go to overseas trade. It's also thought that the head of the Prime Minister and Cabinet Department, Mike Codd, will also be moved, causing concern in the public service.
Prime Minister Keating has also announced Australia's recognition of the new Soviet Commonwealth, forged from the ruins of the Communist Empire. Mr Keating paid tribute to Mikhail Gorbachev, who resigned his post today, as one of the great figures of modern times. He said the former Soviet president's foresight and courage had helped greatly to make the world a safer place for everyone. As Mikhail Gorbachev stepped aside, the red flag of communism was finally hauled down. Before leaving, Mr Gorbachev said he was alarmed that the Soviet people were no longer citizens of a great power. Russia will now take over the Soviet seat at the United Nations, and its President Boris Yeltsin has promised that the nuclear button he controls will never be used. From Moscow, the ABC's correspondent John Lombard reports.
The man who embraced the openness of Western society announced he was quitting office in a characteristic manner, live on satellite TV.
Fellow citizens, in view of the situation that has developed with the development of the Commonwealth of Independent States, I am terminating my activity as President of the USSR.
It was an emotional moment for the man who's been described as a coach without a team. Outside, in the chill Moscow air, the red flag of communism was hauled down and the standard of the rising Russian Federation raised instead. Half a world away, Gorbachev's admirers gathered to pay tribute to the man who had shattered 7 decades of communist power. Gorbachev had phoned his American friend 2 hours before he resigned.
I'd like to express on behalf of the American people my gratitude to Mikhail Gorbachev for years of sustained commitment to world peace and for his intellect, vision, and courage.
President Bush jumped the gun on his own timetable and announced the immediate recognition of Russia and 5 other republics: Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzia, and Armenia. Diplomatic ties with 6 other republics await improvements in their human rights records. In many ways, Mikhail Gorbachev was a prisoner in the Kremlin, and it showed. He never had a popular mandate for his revolution, and he was never a popularly elected president. And for too many of his own people, his program was all rhetoric and no action. But now that Gorbachev is gone, the same serious problems face Boris Yeltsin. And unless he can swing the economy around and quickly, Yeltsin may become as publicly reviled as Gorbachev.
Indonesia's inquiry into last month's Dili massacre has found at least 50 people died when troops opened fire on a crowd in East Timor's provincial capital. The official Indonesian account of the shootings had previously put the number killed at 19, with another 91 wounded. Indonesia's President Suharto is expected to comment on the report within the next few days. The Sydney to Hobart fleet is tonight making a spectacular spinnaker charge down the New South Wales coast. At last report, bobsled was in the lead, 2 hours ahead of the race record set by Kealoha back in 1975. Amazon is following in second place, Brindabella in third.
Boxing Day brought perfect conditions for sailors and spectators alike. Leading the charge, the Canberra-based pocket maxi Brindabella. But it wasn't long before arch-rival Amazon was asserting its authority. The undefeated Amazon led by a minute after the beat to Sydney Heads. Ploughing through the swell and chop from the spectator fleet, Amazon showed a clean pair of heels to round the sea mark and power south under Spinnaker. Brindabella was next to turn for Hobart, with the fancied Apollo back in 6th place. But further back in the fleet, it wasn't all plain sailing. Sydney two-tonner Raw Talent made an early exit, courtesy of a collision with one of the race club's official boats. The $200,000 yacht had part of the bow torn off by the impact, damaging sails and mast in the process. Late this afternoon off Wollongong, the downwind flyers were dominating in custom-made conditions. Surfing under the stiff nor'easter, bobsled, skippered by former 18-foot skiff world champion Peter Sorensen, had claimed the lead. Relegated to second, Amazon had problems changing Spinnaker. Behind those two in the race for line honours are Brindabella, the French-crewed Hammer of Queensland, then Rager and Apollo. Forecasts suggest the fleet will enjoy the same conditions throughout the night, with a southerly change predicted for later tomorrow.
A rare virus believed to be transmitted in a similar way to AIDS has been found in 2 remote Aboriginal communities in the Northern Territory. Doctors are now trying to find a way to prevent the spread of the virus, HTLV1, which can cause leukemia and brain disorders.
Human T-cell lymphotropic virus, or HTLV1, was first discovered in Japan and the Pacific Islands, but research has confirmed it also occurs in some Aboriginal communities. The virus can lead to serious neurological disorders or a rare form of leukemia known as ATLL, the only cases in Australia found in the Territory.
2 cases in a population of 30,000 Aboriginal people is not a high incidence, but it does tell us we need to be aware and we need to work out what's going on so we can understand what should be done to prevent the problem happening in the future.
It's not known what causes the virus, but it's thought to be transmitted early in life through blood or even breast milk.
It may be spread sexually in the same way as the HIV or AIDS virus, but it's by no means as harmful as the AIDS virus.
A Darwin research team, led by Dr. Ivan Bastian, is studying DNA sequences which highlight the difference between local and overseas strains of HTLV1. The scientists are hoping to determine the effects on Aboriginal people and who's at risk.
After years of protest, Israeli officials say they'll grant full access to the Dead Sea Scrolls, arguably the most significant archaeological find of the century. As Middle East correspondent Trevor Borman reports, it's the latest move in a 40-year-old wrangle over the controversial scrolls.
They were found by Bedouin tribesmen in caves on the edge of the Dead Sea. The 2,000-year-old remains of animal skins containing Christian and Jewish writings and the earliest known version of the Old Testament. 40 years later, many of the manuscripts remain untranslated, as scholars and governments bicker over who owns them and who should be allowed to study them. Under pressure from academics around the world, Israel has now agreed to allow other scholars to study unpublished manuscripts. Now there's a new player in the controversy. The caves, and all of the West Bank for that matter, were part of Jordan before the '67 war. From Amman, 50 kilometres on the other side of the Dead Sea, historians are maintaining that they should have the final say on what happens to the scrolls.
We believe that these manuscripts belong to humanity.
The suspicion was that the Israelis were hiding information damaging to Judaism, but that claim was always denied.
I simply have a trust in my predecessors and in my colleagues that they are not hiding anything.
And the Israelis can guarantee that now. Scholars wishing to study unpublished fragments of scrolls can apply in writing. But the Israelis will still decide who can study what parts of the 200 scrolls still to be released.
And now a quick look at tomorrow's weather. Brisbane fine, Sydney fine and very warm, Canberra mainly fine, Melbourne a few showers and thunderstorms, Hobart a few showers, Adelaide mainly fine, Perth fine, but Darwin a late thunderstorm. The news to this minute, I'm PHILIPPA MacDonald. Thanks for being with us around Australia on Late Edition. Right now, Jack Egan's Cricket Archives.